Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, I'm Wes Hines. I'm the Nuclear Engineering Department head here at the University of Tennessee. Welcome to our Wednesday Colloquium program. I see Morris Hassler is here. He's going to be our speaker. He's already trying to shun his duties as speaker and get one of his colleagues to do it who happens to be in the audience. Let me introduce Morris. So Morris Hassler is the Senior Director of Global Security and Strategic Partnerships for Consolidated Nuclear Security, CNS, which is responsible for the management and operation of both Y-12 and Pantex, which is in Amarillo, Texas. In this role, he's responsible for the management of nuclear nonproliferation, counterterrorism, emergency response, nuclear fuel development and supply, specialized manufacturing and technical service programs at both Y-12 and Pantex. He's worked in the nuclear field since 1991, gaining a wide range of experience and in-depth understanding of the commercial and military nuclear material supply chains, international and domestic nuclear security and non-proliferation programs, research reactor and isotope production nuclear fuel cycles, and special nuclear material removal, storage, and disposition initiatives. He has a Master of Science in Industrial and Systems Engineering from the University of Tennessee, and both an MBA and a BS in Industrial Technology from Tennessee Tech. He's an active member of ANS, where he has served in various leadership positions in the Nuclear and Nonproliferation Policy Division, including being the first chairman of the NNPD. He's also a fellow of the Institute of Nuclear Materials Management and actively serves on several committees. Welcome, Morris.
Thank you, Wes. Dr. Hines, I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this colloquium. Excited to see all of the folks that's joined us here. And I'm looking forward to discussing some of the major non-proliferation issues or global security things that we do both at Consolidated Nuclear Security at the Y-12 plant and Pantex plant. But then I also really want to spend most of my time kind of talking about some of the non-proliferation issues of today, and then hopefully having some good active feedback from your students back and forth and having plenty of time for questions. I do need to state that my comments today, I mean, outside of this first formal presentation portion that you'll see, that the rest of my comments associated with the larger nuclear non-proliferation activities that are going on today are those of my own and not representative of the U.S. government, the National Nuclear Security Administration, or Consolidated Nuclear Security. Because as you could imagine, some of those things could get sensitive if it looked like they were official comments coming through the U.S. government. My discussions today is primarily going to be around current activities and non-proliferation and global security. I'll try to work through this and provide remarks for about 45 minutes, then hopefully leave 15 minutes for questions and open dialogue. Based on that, let me again introduce myself. I mean, we've had it introduced. I do appreciate seeing Karen Hogue out there in the audience. Karen is a fantastic individual and a very knowledgeable person of the field of nonproliferation and arms control and the other pieces. And so I'm excited to see her going ahead and getting her PhD. So welcome to everyone. So I'll give you a little bit of overview of what we do at Y-12 and the Pantex plant. And so let me do that very quickly, because again, I don't want to spend the time to bore you all on what we do from a company perspective, but really to get in and talk about some of the bigger issues of today. Again, who we are. We're at the Pantex plant is in Amarillo, Texas. As you can see, it's a very flat area out there with a lot of land and things that go on. About 3,300 employees out there. Of those, about half of those employees are represented by unions. Average age is 47, which that's that's a pretty old age for a workforce, but actually, believe it or not, it has improved over the last few years. Average years of service is about 15. Employees with degrees, about 20% with associates, 40 with bachelor's, master's, and not as many PhDs. We're a little different at both these production sites, and we are considered production sites than the national laboratories in that we have a lot more applied engineering and science applications than we do the theoretical side. Therefore, our number of PhDs are generally less than some of the national labs. You can see at Y12, we have, actually it's grown from this. It's interesting every time I present this, the number goes up quite a bit. We're almost at about 6,000 employees since I've updated this chart. We've hired almost 1,000 employees this last year. We're really ramping up quite a bit on our employment. And so of those, about a third of our workforce is represented by union or craft personnel. Average age is a little older at Y12. Of course, that's coming down, associated with a lot of the new hires that we've been doing recently. Age 49 is getting up there because a lot of folks can begin to start thinking about eligibility for retirement around the age of 55, 56 in that time frame. Average years of service is 13. Again, we have a few more PhD and master's folks at Y12. Several of those are in my organization, actually, working on some of these non-proliferation issues. As you see there, one of the things that's very scary at both sites is about over 40% of the population is eligible to retire within 5 years, which means we are always looking for new talent and to bring folks on. And part of this discussion, of course, would be to recruit you all. We'd love to have you all support the mission sets that we have. Speaking of mission sets, we are part of what's considered the nuclear security enterprise with the Department of Energy, National Nuclear Security Administration. That's the portion of the Department of Energy which handles nuclear weapons, nuclear materials, versus the rest of the Department of Energy, which of course does a lot of energy matters. We are more closely aligned with the Department of Defense. These sites is actually, it used to be called the Nuclear Weapons Complex, but now it's the Nuclear Security Enterprise. As you see there, you have both design laboratories, which are primarily at Lawrence Livermore, and then you have Los Alamos National Laboratory that are primary design agencies. Sandia is also a design agency for non-physics packages. You have the Nevada National Security Site, which is basically a test site. It used to be the Nevada test site. They do a lot of subcrits and other experiments and other very important national security work out there. And then you have the production sites, the production plants that actually take those designs and actually make the nuclear weapons or dismantle the nuclear weapons or reuse the material. Everything comes in and leaves at the Pantex Plant in Amarillo, Texas. That's the major assembly and disassembly nuclear weapons facility. So you have things coming in from the Department of Defense, parts and pieces going out to the different production sites associated with their mission, and then materials coming from those production sites coming back to Pantex for assembly and then back out to the Department of Defense. The Department of Defense does not own the nuclear weapons. The Department of Energy actually, and this is part of the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, is amended to keep a good separation between the military and civilian control. Those weapons are the weapons, and the weapons material stays within the civilian ownership within the civilian community, which is the Department of Energy, but then they are given for use to the Department of Defense if needed. When those are not out there strategically deployed, those come back to the Department of Energy for use. That's kind of a separation of military and civilian control. On that, just to kind of give you a little bit of an aspect of the Y12 portion of where we are, we're in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We're part of a larger Oak Ridge reservation. A lot of folks hear Oak Ridge National Laboratory and thinks that's everything in Oak Ridge. However, it's the Oak Ridge Reservation, which has 3 major Department of Energy sites. Actually, it's probably 2 major now, which would be the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is a world-leading Office of Science and Office of Nuclear Energy Laboratory, primarily Office of Science Laboratory, that also does some very important national security work. Then you have the Y12 National Security Complex, as mentioned, is one of the production facilities associated with the national security complex. But we also do a lot of science and a lot of nuclear nonproliferation and global security and work for other government agencies. And then you have some of the cleanup activities, which would be the East Tennessee Technology Park. This is just to orient you a little bit about the difference between Y-12 and the other sites in Oak Ridge. So what do we do at Pantex and Y-12? I like to coin the term of our current president, Michelle Reichert, is that what our job is assuring global freedom. That means everything from providing a reliable and safe nuclear deterrent for ourselves and for our allies. As long as there's going to be nuclear weapons in the world, we're going to need to maintain our nuclear weapons, and we need to do that in a very safe and sound and reliable fashion. But we also, the other three of these areas are things that I'm definitely responsible for, which is supporting nuclear nonproliferation, counterterrorism, and counterproliferation efforts, supplying fuel for naval reactors, research reactors, medical isotope reactors and production activities, and then of course develop national security solutions for other government agencies. We do support a lot of three-letter agencies and other folks with what we do. In that, this just shows you some of those customers that we have out there, from NNSA to other departments of energy facilities, and then other federal agencies, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense. Department of Justice is primarily FBI, and then other groups like the intelligence community, the three-letter agencies, and even folks like NASA in space, some of the new space reactors, the surface power, as well as propulsion reactors. We're engaged in those. And then we also work with other foreign governments on their research reactors. The Mutual Defense Agreement is a partnership we have primarily with the United Kingdom on their weapons programs, and so we work with them. And we do, of course, work with academic institutions and commercial companies. So what do we do in the areas? And I'm going to concentrate, I'm not going to really talk a lot about the nuclear weapons business that we do at CNS or at Pantex and Y-12, but more of the programs that I'm responsible for, which relate more to nuclear nonproliferation or supply of fuel. And as you can see here, we supply enriched uranium, low enriched uranium primarily to countries all over the world. We also do a lot of development on new fuels, or things like the white sand. It's old fuels, but remaking those old fuels for things like the U.S. Army's White Sands missile range fast burst reactor program of making large cores for that. I mentioned things like we did a surface power demonstration reactor core for NASA, and so that proved to work very well. And then I've mentioned other. We supply the current research reactors like the Oak Ridge high flux isotope reactor and other U.S. reactors, as well as those around the world. And where we supply material, we need to go get material. We've been supplying material, enriched uranium around the world since the Atoms for Peace initiative in the 60s. What that leads to is the fact that back in the 60s and 70s, the program started out only providing low enriched uranium. But of course, if you use low enriched uranium and you like the flux and the other operation of that, hey, highly enriched uranium is even better. So then there was a program to provide highly enriched uranium to some of these research reactors around the world. Unfortunately, some of those reactors that were supplied back during the 60s and 70s are not necessarily the best places and most secure places that you would want that material to remain. Places such as Iraq, places in Iran, other countries around the world that material has been there. So one of the other missions that we have is that when there's material that's been made available for us to dispose of or to take care of, we have teams that go all around the world to take highly enriched uranium or weapons usable material that's in a non-secure, non-sustainable location and without a need, and we pick it up and we bring it back and we make sure it's properly secured, stored, and dispositioned. What you see here are just some pictures of some of those events that we've been engaged in. We do have a full-fledged, along with a partnership with Oak Ridge National Laboratory, a mobile uranium set of facilities that we can come up and be ready to go anywhere in the world with short notice to be able to go package materials up safely and get it out of those particular countries. You see just some of those countries up there where we've had activities in the past. We've had folks deployed to Iraq and other places to get materials out of there, not necessarily highly enriched uranium. In some cases, it's low enriched uranium that we just don't want it to be utilized by others or sources or those type things. The other thing we do a lot of training. We train a lot of response teams on how to protect, if they're going to continue to need to have materials, especially radiological materials, such as at your hospitals, your blood bank irradiators, your gamma knives, those type things, those sources that if in the wrong hands and used the wrong way could create a dirty bomb, those type things. We've trained thousands of response personnel on how to properly protect those materials or respond if there is an illicit threat associated with those. And so we do a lot of those activities. Excited to say that we've got a new training center, enhanced technology and training center that's underway right now in Oak Ridge. It's going to be built on 82 acres of property on the Oak Ridge Reservation off of the Y-12 site. It will start out with two primary facilities, one which is the Emergency Response Training Facility. That is a state of Tennessee funded facility that will do a lot of the classroom related training. And then we have a secondary facility, which is called, that's funded by the federal government, which is the Simulated Nuclear and Radiological Activities Facility. In these facilities, they're going to use state-of-the-art techniques for nuclear detection, nuclear response, and those type things. And it's going to be advanced training for personnel with hands-on, giving them hands-on experience and realistic performance-based modules. We're going to use heavy use of state-of-the-art training, digital training platforms, meaning augmented reality and virtual reality training. These buildings are being designed specifically to incorporate in the latest sets of technology to be able to enhance those training experiences that are out there. So we're excited on that. These facilities are planned to come online the spring of next year, actually. So they're through design and ground is starting to be cleared out there, and construction activities will start very soon. Again, something that's not that we do a lot of is some very interesting manufacturing activities, making some very special feedstocks, especially more recently, fabricating metal wire with some very unique aspects associated with what metals we're utilizing and what alloys we're utilizing. And then, of course, we're using different additive manufacturing machines and techniques to deal with both metals, resins, thermoplastics, and a lot of other activities associated with that. So we're a big manufacturing and chemical plant at Y-12 in particular, and they have some of those capabilities at the Pantex plant. Something that all you nuclear engineers out there will like is on our nuclear detection and analysis side of the house. We have a lot of nuclear engineers at the site that we work with. We have these test areas. It's our nuclear detection and source testing centers that we have 2 of those at Y-12. We also have a large or a couple of sets of facilities out at the Pantex plant that we've done measurements on full-up weapons, as well as we have high explosive ranges and things out there. We also house the National Uranium Forensic Archive at Y-12. So a lot of the, any of the material produced in the United States associated with the different programs over the years, we have the archive of those materials. And so we work a lot of forensic activities associated with that in association with other laboratories across the complex. We also have the New Brunswick Laboratory Center for Certified Reference Materials. We basically, if you've got a radiation detection device or something that you have to calibrate and you need to have certified reference materials, all of those materials come from us now. They used to come out of the New Brunswick Laboratory. That mission shifted to us about 2 years ago, so we house that and make sure those certified reference materials get all the way around the world. I know I'm going through this very quickly here, but I just want to make sure and have time associated with some of the larger programs that we deal with. or that are associated that the country needs to be concerned about right now. We also have something called our nuclear counterterrorism and emergency response teams. These are what's called the NEST teams. These are like the firefighters that are running into the fire, except these are folks that are running towards a nuclear device that has been found somewhere. It's kind of like it's not like quite like the show 24, but it's these guys, these folks, and they're real heroes in my mind, because they're out there. They know what could happen on a very bad day, but they're out there to protect the rest of us, to detect materials. These folks are at every Super Bowl, every World Series, every major event, inauguration, or other things. They're all around the campus, always looking for materials and radiological signals. They never get to watch any of the games or enjoy any of the games, because they're there trying to keep everybody safe. So they do that, as well as this group also does if there was pre-debt or post-debt forensics. It comes out of this group, and then they work with other government agencies, of course, to be deployed anywhere in the world if there is a nuclear device that needs to be taken care of, and we're asked to assist with that. So very important mission that these folks have. The part of that group, the Radiological Response Assistance Program, there's different regions for that. Region 2 is out of Y12 in Oak Ridge. Region 4 is supported, it's out of Albuquerque, but it's supported by our team at Pantex and at Amarillo. But then also you have these larger groups, which is the Joint Tactical Operations Teams and others that would deal with nuclear devices that if they came across those. As I mentioned, we do a lot of support to the intelligence community, both from an analysis standpoint and other expertise, subject matter experts, evaluations of things, also helping test detection equipment and other things associated with that. As you can imagine, I can't talk a lot about this, but we have special compartmentalized information facilities both at Y12 and at Pantex as part of our nuclear production and field intelligence element. The Department of Energy is authorized to support the intelligence community through special privileges and executive orders associated with that, which then that allows us with our civilians to be able to not do any covert type intelligence gathering or anything like that. We don't do intelligence gathering, we just do analysis of activities. Again, we do a lot of manufacturing and testing of high explosives. We've got, we can do full up activities, and it's pretty fun to see that happen out at the Pantex facility. Some very large, the best way to get rid of former nuclear weapons components is just to what we call burn them, but it's a rapid burn. It's an explosion associated with how we get rid of the high explosive elements at Pantex. But of course, all of this, we do have heavy research and development programs. I mean, we have over $35 to $40 million of investments of our own, what we call plant-directed research and development funds every year. And a lot of this is the earlier portion, the early technology maturation levels of things that our scientists and engineers work on. Of course, we do support larger research and development initiatives from NNSA, whether it's from defense programs or whether it's through the Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation Research and Development Group. We have lots of proposals that we support those arenas as well. So there's a lot of ways folks work with us through whether it's partnerships or licensing and agreements or what we call CRADAs, which is Cooperative Research and Development Agreements, to get to those funds. We do work with universities, and we're continuing to try to expand that. Our top tier universities or key ones we work with, of course, is the University of Tennessee here. And then, of course, being in Texas, you've got Texas Tech University, which is close by. And then Texas A&M University is part of the partnership that we work with out at in Amarillo, as well as some work at Y12. Then you see other targeted universities we work with, whether it's Auburn, Tennessee Tech University, North Carolina, South Carolina, and then several other universities and groups that you see there, such as Fisk University and some other minority serving institutions. We like to do a lot of work with those minority serving institutions. And so a lot more work. I think you're going to see a lot more activities associated with what we do in the future with universities. And so that's always an exciting thing. You know, to summarize all of this, and then I can get into some of my other not formal talks here, would be that, you know, a lot of folks don't know who we are at Y12 and Pantex. And in the past, that's been there for a particular reason, in that we just did our job. But what we have is we got a long history of people who know how to deal with hands-on work with materials. It's a great training ground for people getting into the industry that really want to actually work with materials, not just study materials or research materials, but actually have hands-on. And so we have that expertise. And then we also, you know, we support, of course, the nuclear deterrent, but we also have these other things that we've done for decades, making the world a safer place by removing materials. So again, we love the National Nuclear Security Administration is very supportive of our other missions that we have, because it brings great fresh ideas to solve some of these other problems. We're not always just looking inward, we're looking outward. And then these other things also keeps our technology and our people sharp. And so what we like to say is we solve global security challenges at our folks, so at our places. On that, there's, I say, hey, come join our team. Lots of cool pictures here of our personnel out in the workforce. This just gives you a snapshot of some of the things that are there. Here again, everything from carriers to production isotopes and airplanes. That was in Mexico, taking a shipment of highly enriched uranium out of Mexico. That was at a research reactor. You've got real weapon type works going on. That's a B6, that's a B83 weapon there. That's a trainer that's being folks are working on. And you see lots of glove boxes, lots of stainless stuff in different places. And then, of course, we have lots of security guards protecting all of those things. Again, lots of, you see down here in the lower right-hand corner, that looks like, I think that's oxide for HIFER. Getting ready for HIFER fuel. That would be highly enriched uranium oxide down there on the right, being sieved to get the particle size right. And so, like I said, training lots of folks, machining. There's the crusty reactor. Well, it's HIFER down on the far left, but the other three pictures are of the crusty core. There's three pieces of that core up on the right-hand side that make that up, with heat pipes down the side, and they run use Stirling technology for generation of electricity associated for that reactor. Again, got new buildings. We're not just old places and old factories. We have some pretty nice new offices and some pretty secure vault-like, fort-like facilities at both of our sites. And so, pretty cool place to work. I've been there. This is my 30 years that I've been working out with this mission. And so it's an exciting place to work. So on that, I will transition a little bit. I'm watching the chat here. I don't see any particular questions. Before I move into the next phase, are there any questions for me about what we do at Y12 or at Pantex before I start talking the broader mission sets?
I don't see any hands coming up, so I guess
All right.
I guess we can move forward. I'm sure we have a lot of people that are not shy to ask questions, so I'm sure.
All right. Well, here again, so that just tells you who we are and what, kind of what my background is and why it kind of, I guess, maybe sets the stage that allows me to maybe talk about, I guess, maybe gives us some credentials behind some of these other viewpoints I'm going to talk about now on the greater nuclear nonproliferation and global security stage, which is kind of what I really wanted to talk about.
Morris,
Yes.
Morris, before you get there, I might just have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
So I guess, you know, since we're talking to graduate students and maybe there are some undergraduates lurking around, you know, what's kind of the influx of new hires that you've at least seen, you know, fairly recently, or that you may, you know, be projecting for the future? Do you, I know, I personally know that you've hired several of our undergraduates, especially those that have had some criticality safety background, but some people that have background too. What type of manpower needs do you have? And I know you're just in one section, so
right.
If so, we could kind of
again. I mean, it's constantly
manpower needs.
Both in our our engineering and development functions. Of course, we'll be hiring a lot of engineers. Of those, a lot of times they're, you know, we do hire a lot of undergraduate and master's level, but in our development and other realms, we do hire PhD levels. We do find ourselves seemingly hiring people after they've maybe gone out and done postdoc work. We've hired a lot of folks that's been either at Oak Ridge National Lab or other sites that are former UT. I mean, they're not former, they're UT graduates that we have on board. I know several of those are in our group personally. I know you know Dr. Martin Williamson and his crew, and he's hired a whole bunch of folks that work with us on that. But the future projections of that, I mentioned, actually the goal this year starting in for both sites was that human resources was required or had a target of hiring 1,200 individuals this year. We have a population of about 10,000 between the two sites. So that's a pretty good increase associated with how many people that we need to bring on board. Now, those folks are not all engineers or not all scientists. A lot of that population are folks that are construction craft. They are also, you know, they're material handlers, they're chemical operators, they're what I would call, you know, at least high school degree, with most potentially having at least an associate type degree, even for our hourly personnel. What we call our craft personnel, they're highly technical as well. And so it's a mixture of those. Engineering, I think, is about 200 folks that they're supposed to be hiring and bringing on board. And it's just going to continue to increase as you saw that retirement age is creeping up there. We have a lot of folks that will be retiring, and so we got to have some good folks filling their shoes as they step out.
Okay, where would students find those job opportunities? Is there an HR site?
There is. I mean, on our sites,
site?
Yeah, on both the Y12 site and the Pantex site, you'll see there's careers associated with that. We have different activities. We also have a pretty strong internship and other program that it was stronger prior to COVID. COVID has caused some challenges with some of that, but we still are I mean, I know our group, just a group of my folks, which we have about 90 folks in my group, we're going to have 4 interns supporting our programs at least. And so we have those type things. And then there's also job fairs. I mean, I know there's our recruiting folks and our university folks. I don't know when it's planned, Wes, and when it is, but normally there's a University of Tennessee portion of that. But good people to reach out to are our former graduates or others like Ashley Stowe. I know you know Dr. Ashley Stowe and others like that. He's leading up a lot of our university programs. That's a good person to reach into. And
okay,
so,
thanks.
Yeah, and these type colloquiums, it puts you in touch with someone that can introduce you to someone and let you know when the opportunities are. But there is a website, there are postings and that type thing.
Okay, yeah, and we get emails from Martin when he's looking for people with specific expertise. So really enjoy having our alums out there that reach back and look at the next generation of fabulous employees.
Yeah, and we're working very closely with your department and plan to expand our partnerships with you guys, and that will just feed more and more. Looks like I see Brian Cowell on here. So my buddy Brian over at the Oak Ridge National Lab, of course, and I don't see we got Matt Cook on here as well. I don't know if he's on there, but we've just got another contract with you guys to do a lot more work with some of your personnel that's over there, and of course Dr. Howard Hall we work heavily with, and so I think we're going to see a lot more interactions with y'all. All right. So in the, I know Wes or Dr. Hines, you talked about, y'all like to see you're a bunch of engineers. I mean, I'm an engineer, but you can say, well, maybe not quite. He's a systems and industrial engineer. That's not a real engineer. But anyways, but still, one of the things from a technical standpoint, it's hard to get to the technical work if you're never allowed and you never receive the funding or you never get your projects approved. And so in the nuclear world, you may ask yourself, hey, why should I be concerned about nuclear nonproliferation or nuclear policy related things? You want to do the technical aspects in the field, and you want to design reactors or work in, medical isotopes or different things like that. Let me make something very clear. I've been in the business for 30 years. And one of the things that it's taught me is that you'd better understand the politics of nuclear and how to learn to navigate through those non-proliferation concerns or how to get around some of those unfounded fears associated with the word nuclear, because those are the ones that are going to be funding these projects. And so, the politicians, the activists, and the others that might be uninformed are the ones that's going to kill your project. It's going to kill your funding. It can eliminate your job and your dreams if you don't understand their concerns and try to educate them properly associated with the benefits of nuclear and the safety and security steps that are being taken out there. So this is a technical group, but one of the things with my involvement with the American Nuclear Society and others, that's why I was very heavily involved in the Nuclear Nonproliferation Policy Division of the American Nuclear Society, is I saw a real gap between the technical aspects of the nuclear engineering departments and what was happening in the world and what was either was killing the nuclear industry or dramatically impacting those nuclear jobs out there. And that's not the full understanding or have the appreciation of the nonproliferation and security concerns associated with this technology. So based on that, what's going on in today's world in the nonproliferation arena? One, you've got, fortunately, the United States desires a world, and this is something that President Obama stated, and I think it's been followed up by many others. And those of us that are actually in the nuclear weapons complex and actually make and maintain nuclear weapons, all of us truly want to have a world with no longer that need nuclear weapons. The folks that deal in these production plants and labs more than probably anyone else knows the power and destruction and the absolute horror associated with if a nuclear weapon ever had to be used. So there's no one else out there that would love to see these things go away. But unfortunately for the security of our nation, until we can convince others to also get rid of theirs at the same time, we're going to have to continue to keep our national security in place and make sure that what we have is reliable and something that if we, Lord help us if we ever had to use those, but if we had to, we want to make sure they do the purpose which we've intended them to do. The concern though is Russia and China has accelerated even though the U.S. has tried to keep scaled back associated with no new weapons programs and everything else since really the early 90s, Russia and China have accelerated their weapons programs and their production capabilities and have they continue to increase their aggressive actions associated with the geopolitical world that's out there. You still have North Korea and Iran that's still advancing their nuclear programs and still wanting the attention and trying to have influence in their regions of power, and they want to do that through nuclear programs. You've got some of the former non-weapon states that's starting to cause some regional instability because, as we're trying to see a resurgence in the nuclear power and the use of, nuclear medicine and research and those type of things, you've got to ensure that the proper nonproliferation and controls and safeguards approaches are applied to those programs to try not to keep those areas very stable. And the other things you've got challenges with is the current U.S. triad, which is, our submarine force, our bomber force, and our land-based missiles are, those are pretty old systems. I mean, B-52s are very old. A lot of those, the silos associated with our Minuteman missiles or the other things are pretty dated technologies that's out there. And so some of those are things that are going to need to continue to be upgraded to make them effective, which then that could appear to others that we're advancing our nuclear programs. So let's talk about the one that's out there that had a whole lot of attention about 2 years ago, and that's the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea. North Korea has been it's been a challenge for 25 years, and multiple administrations have dealt with the North Koreans, and commitments and decommitments and promises, and then falling back on their promises. And unfortunately, over that time period, North Korea was able to advance, of course, and to be able to create a nuclear weapons materials production capability, and then actually be able to make nuclear weapons and test nuclear weapons, and then also their delivery systems, which have then become somewhat of a concern. A lot of activities occurred. The previous administrations have been almost an iterative approach of, okay, we really are not going to talk face to face. You show us that you're going to behave yourself, and then we might start lifting sanctions. The former administration, the Trump administration, as with many things, I'm not going to get political, but let's go get the deal done. So it was a very forceful approach. Let's get to the table. Let's meet face to face with anyone that we need to talk, and let's try to get the deal done. It looked like that had promise. There were activities going, but the demands were full denuclearization before there's any relief on sanctions, and really it just there were promises made prior to some of the meetings occurring, but then after the meetings and the limelight went by, the follow-up details, all those negotiations collapsed. Recently, I mean, the Biden administration's currently evaluating their approach to North Korean denuclearization. And what I believe we'll see there is similar to what we saw in the past, which would be more of an incremental approach of progress steps of let's get something, let's do some denuclearization steps, and then we maybe can, scale back some sanctions. However, President Biden did confirm to Japanese Prime Minister Suga on January 27th that still has the commitment of a complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So then you move to what's happening with Iran's nuclear program. Of course, Iran has had a long history of a nuclear program. We've supported Iran prior to the revolution in '78. There was a lot of U.S. support of nuclear programs in Iran and nuclear research and test reactors. Then even after that, there was a fallback, and then also had other countries, Russia wanting to help with the Bushehr reactor and some other activities there. And then it went through a kind of a dark phase of, I guess with Ahmadinejad trying to, wanting to reestablish themselves as a nuclear power and nuclear technologies. And so a lot of things being touted. And so it's starting to get a little bit scary with the amount of material that they were able to produce and some of the other things that were going on. And therefore, the several different agreements in place. But in 2015, you had the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, with Iran. And so it was with the P5+1, so the Europeans and the US and Iran associated with that negotiations. That agreement was not perfect. The past administration said it was deeply flawed, and hence why they pulled out of it in 2018, and that it was being violated on several fronts. However, some of those aspects in that agreement were very positive. It did stem the production of weapons usable material. It did slow Iran's pathway to a nuclear weapon. And unfortunately, with pulling out of that and increasing and putting sanctions on heavily over the last couple of years, has caused Iran to kind of ratchet up their approach associated, and they've been in much more violation even with the current existing plan that's out there. I have the Biden administration has recently announced that it does have the desire to rejoin discussions associated with that to see how we could get back to the negotiating table with Iran to try to ensure that they don't get a pathway to a nuclear weapon. So that's kind of where that's at. Like I said, the administration change maybe can bolster some of those aspects associated with getting Iran back to the table. So then what about the other threats? What's going on? Well, I mentioned Russia. Of course, Russia is modernizing its nuclear forces and developing new platforms. And here again, none of these things, I'm not confirming any of the things I'm talking about here. I'm just, these are just some of the things you're seeing reported in the open source, open news side. So I can confirm or deny any of these things of knowing any personal knowledge about those. But, there's reports out there of, their hypersonic glide vehicles, their autonomous underwater vehicles, nuclear powered cruise missiles that you've seen in the press, and newly, they've got new MIRV systems, which that's a multiple independent re-entry vehicles. That means several warheads on top of a singular weapon system, a single missile system that's out there. Those have been in place. Both the U.S. and Russia has those, but the current treaties that's out there limit how many can be on those particular missile systems. So again, there's also a lot of different efforts and activities to defeat some of what the U.S.'s missile defense systems and others that are out there. So unfortunately, that's escalating both on the Russian, and I'll talk a little bit about the China front coming up. So the other concern that I want to throw out there for contemplation is, do we really understand fully what the Russian leaders' thoughts about first use are associated with nuclear weapons? They feel like, well, maybe if they just use a small one-off type nuclear weapon for a particular conflict, is that going to escalate into full-fledged nuclear war? I think we could potentially have a misstep there or a misunderstanding, and then that could ensure that the situation could escalate like we didn't think about. And so that's worrisome and scary associated with, from my viewpoint. So again, so what should the U.S. response be? Should we have more defensive systems? If we do, there's going to be more systems to try to defeat those. And should we go, start another arms race to create new offensive and defensive nuclear weapon systems? I don't think that's the way to go. So we'll see where that's at. And that's some of these things that are being contemplated out there by a lot of folks. And the other thing that worries you is, okay, what actions are going to justify a U.S. nuclear response, and at what level? Right now we have a lot of other threats, massive cyber attacks or on our infrastructure, financial or political systems. Is that justification? I would hope not, but we'll see where that goes. So that's a growing concern with Russia, and especially with a lot of the nationalistic viewpoints that have been in Russia, and to be frank, a lot of those in the United States and other places around the world. That's a little bit concerning that we're becoming much more nationalistic and ready to fight instead of talking to one another sometimes. Same thing with China. The tensions with China continue to ramp up, particularly in economic and world political areas associated with that. A lot of conflict or potential conflict, or as you've heard in Taiwan and other places, and so that's this over. Then you got issues in the South China Sea. You got the Philippines involved. There could be a quick escalation of activities in a hurry if something happened in Taiwan, or if there's something else, or continued aggression in the South China Sea by the Chinese. And so a lot of that is continuing to be concerning, especially as China is doubling or tripling their capabilities, and so that's very worrisome. And then the other worrisome with China is some of the new development of the non-nuclear or non-kinetic or non-nuclear weapons, kinetic weapon systems that they're doing, and hypersonics and that type of thing. So that's a real concern. Don't forget about India and Pakistan that's out there. I mean, that's always a fuse that's ready to be lit at any one time. Any quick escalation and of conflict between India and Pakistan and Kashmir or wherever it may be. They both have nuclear weapons, and of course the Pakistanis developed nuclear weapons because they knew they couldn't necessarily be able to react to the conventional weapons that India had, and so you've got both of those countries. If I had to worry about the first place of where first use of a weapon might be, it's probably in the South Asia region there. Also worry a lot about security concerns, nuclear security concerns associated with those regimes or the leadership in those countries of how well they're protecting the assets and the nuclear assets that they have and what measures are being taken there. So on that, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to stop those. I could talk a whole lot about nuclear arms control agreements and, New START and the NPT celebrating 50 years of compliance and those type things. But what I'm going to do is stop and see what questions it might be there. Looks like I've got one here. It says, what resources would you recommend to use and reference when trying to educate the public and friends about safe of nuclear material handling? One is to let people know. How many people know that there's 50,000 nuclear medical procedures done in the United States every day? And you don't get those medical isotopes but without nuclear. So all of your the heart test and the other things that's out there that you use Tech 99 with or other things, people have no idea that those are based off of, they come out of either accelerators or nuclear reactors. I even saw a show, was it even the latest Superman and Lois Lane show that came out? They show him going and cooling down a nuclear reactor, and he flies down into the cooling tower to go, to cool what was supposedly the core of the reactor down in the middle of the cooling tower. People just don't understand that nuclear is just a heat source like everything else. They think it's this nuclear bomb ready to go off, and it's just from resources. I think it's just more people trying to get out there. There's some fronts that have not been successful. ANS has tried to get better on education, the Nuclear Energy Institute. There really needs to be a single source and to have a lot more of a media campaign, to be honest with you. Just like, everybody knows the got milk commercials and other things like that. I just think there could be a lot more direct messaging on the benefits of nuclear power. I mean, hey, I still got my Disney, My Friend the Atom book, right? It used to be a good thing back in the 50s and 60s, late 60s. All right. Yeah, got nuclear. I like that.
Yeah.
So other questions?
Karen, I think you're next. Would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Thanks, Morris, for that great talk. It was very feel good. We're all inspired and cheerful. I had a question.
Oh, was it? I didn't know if it was very cheerful.
I'm joking. Yes, no, that was sarcasm. Yeah. There was a lot of dark stuff, but I mean, that's reality, right? So
that's exactly reality.
So I was hoping, this isn't necessarily Y-12 focus, but just with your broader experience and understanding of kind of the landscape, I was hoping that you could speak on kind of the Department of Energy's Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, Risk Reduction Awards. There's several that use or plan to use high-assay LEU fuel, and even TerraPower's molten chloride fast reactor, I think, is planning to use plutonium, theoretically, in their salt. And so I was hoping you could just kind of talk through what your thoughts are in what that seeming gap of, maybe we could put something together for 2 demonstration reactors, but long-term, how do you see that kind of feedstock for these non-traditional fuels being handled?
Well, the good thing of fuels like triso fuels and some of the others are materials that are a little bit more proliferation resistant. All of these designs, except for use of plutonium, is using low enriched uranium. Yes, they're going up above the typical 5%, materials in some of these SMRs. Some are using normal, low enriched uranium, but others are wanting uranium enrichments of 12%, 15%, 19% materials. But I'm seeing a lot of efforts or understanding of engagement with those companies associated with both the nuclear security as well as proliferation resistance of their fuel, because I think they understand that they're probably not going to get licenses or designs that don't have some of those safety and security features built into those reactors that they're going to be building. So I'm seeing some of that. I think as more efforts continue, there needs to be the continued engagement by the nonproliferation community, not to stop nuclear energy and nuclear energy programs, but to inform and to help those designs to make those proliferation resistant and help on the nuclear security aspects of those designs.
Thanks.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, Promise, would you like to ask yours?
Yes. Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. My question is, it's a bit outside of the scope of the talk, but I know that tritium is mainly at Savannah River National Lab. And I guess do you know if there's any talk or like any thoughts about the tritium there maybe being used for a future fusion reactor, of that being like a source of tritium inventory?
Very good question on that. Of course, there's tritium in a lot of places, right? So you know of tritium there, but Savannah River has the aspect of basically doing tritium extraction to support the nuclear weapons program because of the half-life, a 12.5-year half-life of tritium in nuclear weapons. But from a larger aspect of that, tritium goes away. There's not really a big source of that. Actually, the tritium that's being produced right now in the United States is coming out of the Watts Bar reactors out of the Tennessee Valley Authority through the Commercial Light Water Reactor Tritium Program. And so we support the fuel that goes into those reactors because they have special obligations associated with that fuel. So, you can get tritium through accelerators. That's a very expensive way to go. But yeah, I mean, there could be a need for that. I wouldn't say it's at Savannah River because they don't have large stocks of tritium because it goes away. And so they recycle and repurpose it. But those are good questions. I mean, some of the stocks that's out there, I mean, as we continue to go further along on the, on fusion systems associated with that, you're gonna be able to need to have some other activities. Of course, we've supplied a lot of materials to Lawrence Livermore and some other places for some of the experimentation of things that get close to fusion sets, but not sure if that answered your question, Promise, but
no, that was great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, Morris, we probably have time for one more question. There's one there in the chat.
All right. How will HALEU production? There you go. I mean, I love it. Y'all using these acronyms for, believe it or not, we came up with that. That's interesting. The high SALEU, the HALEU production, internationally affect nuclear security challenges in the U.S. Very good point, because with the United States, we currently don't have an enrichment capability that's domestically based, nor is it a capability that can produce above 5% currently. So what that means is that all of the high SALEU production that we're coming up with right now is from down-blended former weapons materials, and that's not an infinite stock. We have been down-blending very well. We've gotten rid of over 200 metric tons of highly enriched uranium over the last 10 years or so, just out through non-proliferation purposes. Unfortunately, most of that, I say unfortunately, looking back now, it's probably unfortunate that we didn't blend that down and keep it as 19.75% instead of it being down blended to less than 5% and then being used in just commercial reactors. So there's really there's not enough material out there for all of these new reactors that are wanting to come online now, and everybody's trying to fight for it and get in line. And so right now, one of the latest with the reactor in Canada that we've talked about and some of the others is looking at getting the material out of Russia. So now you're going to have high SALEU being produced in Russia being shipped all over the world. Fortunately, it is high assay LEU, so it's not as much of a proliferation. You don't have the proliferation threat of weapons usability like you would with HEU. But if it got in the wrong hands and somebody wanted to take that, they could quickly then re-enrich and go on up if they had enrichment capabilities. So I think it does impact the nuclear security challenges for the U.S. I really would like to see the U.S. Get their own, get a enrichment capability back online to be able to support these high assay LEU, whether they're SMRs or advanced reactors. I'd like to see a lot of that production being able to come out of the United States, because if it comes out of the United States, we can make sure that there's the right obligations and peaceful use requirements associated with that material. And we got a lot, if we're providing it, we've got a lot more control on where it goes and how it's used.
Well, great. Appreciate that response.
Okay.
I'd like to thank Morris for spending his time with us today and teaching us a little bit more about Y-12 Pantex, what they do, and what some of the challenges for nuclear non-proliferation are currently and for the future. So thank you, Morris. Hey, Morris,
Thank you for the opportunity. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you stick around just for a second? I had a couple questions in a direct chat for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks everyone.